see the recording has started. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I already mentioned the name of this webinar is called Embracing Women Leaders in Agile, Lean In and Thrive. And we have a great panel put together for you today. We can go to the next slide. The first thing we want to do is actually thank our hosts. So the people responsible for putting this panel of women together is EZT Agile. EZT Agile is an Agile solutions firm located in RTP, North Carolina. They provide Agile solutions as well as some custom tools for your teams. Please, you've already probably visited their site, but come back and see them. There are frequently some webinars, there are sessions, there are lots of resources available right there on the site, and get in touch with them and give them your business, because they're providing this session for all of us to you. And we're really pleased that they're hosting us. But during during Black History Month, there's a special meaning to a panel on diversity, and I'd like to have Bridget tell us a little bit about what the meaning of diversity is and why this is so important to EZT Agile.
Thank you, Rick. EZT Agile is more than just an Agile firm. We have a very big philanthropic arm. And today we are officially launching our Diversity and Inclusion Initiative, which is EZT Stand Up, an acronym for Setting the Agile Narrative for Diversity and Untapping Potential. Our goal is to use our platform to help students reach their potential as future leaders in Agile. This initiative is important for EZT Agile and also for our CEO, Camille Spruill, which unfortunately she could not be with us today. With great sadness, I'm sharing that her husband has passed away this past Monday, and we are thinking about Camille and her family in this difficult time. I'll be taking her place today and expanding her voice for an equal and diverse community. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. And I know the entire Agile community is keeping Camille and her family in our thoughts. And this initiative is so important to her that I'm glad we can go forward with it and keep this program going. So without further ado, let's get right to it. And we want to make sure that you're all still paying attention out there. So we're going to start us off with a poll to see who's joined us today. So we'd like to know what's one thing you want to get out of this session. And so that poll, if you can answer us in the chat box, that would be helpful. So just go right down to the bottom of your screen, click on chat, and just enter what's that one thing you're hoping to get out of this session. You can put more than one thing, but let's see if we can. We have 100 people in here, so let's see if we can get one thing from each of you. I'm just going to watch some of these things coming in. Resources to help the women in IT group. Greater insight and deeper understanding. Learn different ways people from multiple backgrounds are using Agile. A newbie, great. We welcome all newbies here. How can women become more visible and present? Yeah, we're really going to talk about more about this. More information about how women are doing in the Agile environment. So you're going to hear from some, from 5 women anyway, about what it means to them and how it's working for them. And how to drive things in Agile rather than being driven. Interesting. Thanks, Kristen. And subtle workplace items that Mogs like me don't get. I'm a Mog too, so welcome to the club. Middle-aged white guy is what that acronym apparently stands for. I hadn't heard that one before. And removing the myth that admin tasks are owned by our gender. Yeah. I'd give that an amen if I could. All right, and oh, good. Some of you have noticed that we have a second question that went up. Where are you coming from? So we've got Raleigh, we've got North Carolina, Columbus, Georgia, Southern California. Omaha, Texas, Dallas, Rhode Island. I'm from Massachusetts. I know a couple of us are. New Jersey, Tennessee, Boston. This is great. So welcome everyone. I wonder, pay attention. I'd love to know who's coming from the farthest away, because since none of us can travel, we can all vicariously imagine being somewhere else, as opposed to this same four walls that we probably have all been seeing for the past 10 months. So welcome everyone. Let's do a little introduction. My name's Rick Cusalito. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm an Agile coach at Fidelity Investments. I'm really pleased to be part of this panel today as your moderator. And I'm not sure what else I can say about this, except that, just being welcomed into this is a really big part. It's really important to me. Some of the greatest influences in my life have been women. And so just to be welcomed into even this conversation is really powerful to me. Bridget Wilson.
Yes. Yes, so I am the head of Agile Enablement here at EasyT Agile and a principal enterprise Agile coach. And I'm excited just to have the conversation. So I won't dwell too much on my background, but just know that I am like over the moon excited about being here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Bridget. So Jackie Owino, I can do your introduction if you like, or you can take over.
Okay. I am Jackie Owino, and I am the principal Atlassian engineer for EasyT Agile. I've been in IT for 20 years, and I've also been an Agile coach, and I'm really excited to be able to share my experience as well as, just encourage more women and more diversity within the Agile business. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. And Tia, you're on mute.
That would figure. I would be on mute. Hi, everybody. I'm Tia DiMaria. I'm Vice President and Head of Agile Coaching and Education for Workplace Investing, Advanced Process Solutions, and Healthcare with Fidelity Investments. And I am thrilled to be here. Agile is something that is near and dear to my heart. It's a whole mindset and a way that we operate. So I'm excited to be here and be a part of this group with such esteemed colleagues. So thank you.
Thanks, Tia. I guess we'll go to Joyce next.
Joyce Dillo. I'm an Agile coach as well at Fidelity Investments. Looking forward to sharing today, learning and inspiring everyone out here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Joyce. And of course, last but not least, Sally.
Hi, thanks for having me. Sally Jones. I work in product development at Fidelity Investments as part of our stock plan services team. And really, I came at Agile from the people and process side of thinking about organizational change management and the transformation that we have gone through within stock plan services at Fidelity. So glad to be here with all these amazing women.
Thanks, Sally. That's great. So I think we had one more question we wanted to pose to people before we get going in our, and that is, we are using the poll function. So what is your current role? So you should have had popping up on your screen right now a poll. Let's see who's in with us today. Oh, this is like a horse race, watching these bars go back and forth. Agilist, IT, Agilist, IT. And we're going to settle in with, who's coming in late? So it looks like we have a split between Agilists and IT, along with a lot of other. So we'll see what other is as we go along. If you want to throw in your other in the chat, we'd love to hear who else is with us other than just the functions we thought of. So I'm going to stop sharing that poll and we'll get right to it. So let's talk a little bit about women in Agile. Mary Beard, I want to just preface our conversation with this. Mary Beard wrote in her book, Women in Power, a Manifesto, that you can't easily fit women into a structure that is already coded as male. You have to change the structure. So I'm going to just put this question out to our panel. What does it mean for women to lean in and thrive?
So I'll start with that, Rick. I think leaning in and thriving to me really means having confidence, being courageous, and not letting opportunities pass you by. So saying yes, even if you think you're not qualified for something that might come your way. I think courage comes from taking risks, and I think we should all recognize that failure is guaranteed to happen. But if you take a page from the Agile approach and think about things in terms of testing and learning, try it out, own what worked, recognize what didn't work, and adjust as needed. Um, as I think about that, I know that a lot of women, we hear in a lot of groups that we're in, and just even talking with our friends, that a lot of us suffer from imposter syndrome, right? I'm not good enough. I don't know enough. I don't have enough experience. I think there's a lot of ways to build self-confidence and break out of imposter syndromes. I'll share my favorite one that I have employed time and time again, which is fake it till you make it. Just say yes, know that you will figure it out. And, you know, I think that's what I've leaned on a lot in my career. I often will tell my friends, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm figuring it out. And I think that is the part about being courageous, just to say yes. And I think that's where you are leaning in. And then the thriving comes from the experimentation in terms of, what did I learn? What can I do better next time? How can I take what any failures that have happened and learn from them, grow from them. So that's what I would say is leaning in and thriving.
Yeah. Sally, I think you hit on a lot of the things that I was going to say. So I won't even go touch that. But what I'll add to what you said is what I found. I definitely was in the club of fake it till you make it when I was initially a Scrum Master many, many years ago. This was before I didn't even have certification, but I was going to get in there and I was going to try it. But over the years, what I have found to help me lean in and to thrive is to start aligning yourself with others, meaning join a community of practice. If your organization has a group of scrum masters that get together, or maybe it's product ownership, or maybe it's some group, maybe it's just thought leaders and they get together on a regular basis, join those groups, start networking. I can't stress that enough. Network, 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 because in that networking, you may find a mentor, you may find an opportunity that you didn't know anything about, you may develop lifelong friendships. And I believe that when you develop those relationships and people get to know you for who you really are and the strengths that you bring to the table, they're more, in my opinion, they're more willing to help as you go along in your career. And I'll tell you another thing. I've been with EZT Agile for a while, and of course have known Camille and Jackie for quite a long time. But I was a lifelong contractor. So I did that by choice, not because I like the idea of working with a company for a certain amount of time, doing what I can to help them. And then once I was able to help them and I left them better than I found them, I enjoyed going to another organization and learning a new organization and not having to, be one place in a very long time. So that worked for me. But what I have found by doing that is that this agile world is so small. So please always treat people with respect and kindness, do the best job that you can, because when you go from organization to organization and begin interviewing and meeting with people, you will start to see the same faces and people move from one company to the next. So I would say network, join. And if there's no community of practice, then find out how you can start one. You'll be amazed if you get on Slack and start finding out, who wants to start meeting over lunch and start having some brown bag conversations and start driving those conversations. So that's another way that you can lean in when you may not see opportunities in front of you.
Sally and Bridget, thanks so much. That's really insightful information. Now, one of the challenges that I mentioned earlier was just the fact of breaking into this world. So, when the structure is so heavily male, sometimes it's hard to break past what, some of the barriers that we put up. And probably some of you have experienced those barriers. So I'm just going to put it to you. What are some of those barriers that keep women from engaging in Agile roles?
So I want to jump in on this one, Rick, because barriers is so, it's just such a big thing. I've done a lot over the years with Girl Scouts, and we always hear about STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And when folks hear Agile, they immediately jump to technology. So I feel like off the bat, there's a deficit, right? People think of, because they think of technology, they think of software development, and Agile is not about software development. Agile is a mindset. It's a way of working. It's a thought process. You have to have that understanding and that growth mindset to really start there. And if you have that, I'm a poster child for, I don't have a technology background. And I tell folks that all the time. I do not have a tech background, and you do not have to have a tech background to be an Agilist. If we go back to that poll and we were to look at where do folks come from, sure, we have a lot of people in IT, but there are a lot of people who said they were Agilists. And they didn't select IT for a reason. They selected Agilist. One of the biggest barriers, I think, is that we don't have the opportunities. We're not provided with those opportunities. So where we see the opportunities for each other, we need to be able to give them to each other. We're looking for diversity. It's diversity of thought, right? Because I said Agile is a mindset, then let's look at this as how can we help each other with that mindset? I know I sound like a soapbox, but I can't help it. This is one I'm really passionate about.
And I appreciate that passion.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to add a little bit about that, because I personally, I went into technology very early. I graduated with an electrical engineering degree, and I've worked 20 years in IT. And a lot of times when I meet women who are, a bit curious about Agile and, working in that environment, a lot of them are very reluctant because they feel that they will not get the support they need. And some of them, go into those positions and they work, 6 months and they're still not uncomfortable. So I think being able to provide the support for women who are in those roles, as well as encouraging maybe people to actually engage in some of those roles as a trial, can give opportunities for people to feel comfortable. But I think you have a responsibility individually to be able to encourage yourself and venture into things that actually feel uncomfortable and build yourself, as well as the organizations have the responsibility of providing the support for women who might want to be in those positions but feel like the environment is not there.
Thanks, Jackie. I appreciate all of those thoughts. And I'm wondering, you've kind of started us down a path of solving this diversity gap. What are some other ways that we could solve that diversity gap?
So let me jump in there, Rick. So looking at what Jackie has shared as well as Tia, we look at why do we have that gap in the first place, right? Do we have the right people at the table? When I say getting a seat at the table, who's making those decisions in terms of who's at that table, how we influence other people to join, and then being intentional. We want to be deliberate when we are making these decisions, is to say, if you're in the table or on the table, if there's a voice you see that's missing, if you can be that voice for those people, be that voice. If not, see how you elevate other people that don't look like you and bring them to that table. And I think the other thing I like that has also been mentioned here is, especially for women, we don't tend to do a lot of technology roles, right? I don't have a technology background, just as Tia, but I'm in technology supporting those Agile roles. So just being comfortable as we are here sharing that you might not really need that technology background to even do these roles. So get the seat at the table. For the organizations, be intentional on how you make these changes and include the right people with the right voices to spread out that change. So,
yeah, I like that word intentional, because as somebody in our audience here mentioned earlier, we got a bunch of middle-aged white guys making some decisions, and when we are the ones making those decisions, we have to really be intentional and think about what are our biases, what are the things that in our history that we've considered. We have to have a technology background. We have to have, we must know the right people. We must come from certain companies or certain consulting firms, or whatever the background is that we think those people have to have, or what we picture in our minds when we think of what an agilist looks like. We have to wipe that slate clean and think, what's the type of person that I'm looking for? What are the attributes that that person has? And really wipe out all those, all those past, whatever baggage we bring to our recruiting, to our hiring, just to how we bring more voices to the table. That's more important for actually being innovative and being successful in today's business environment. So thank you so much for contributing all of that. I'm gonna switch gears a little bit, because I know I saw in our poll we've got at least a few students in our group, and we probably have some people who are interested in maybe even your path. But what can higher education female students learn from your experience in order to pursue an Agile career?
I'll take that one. Starting with an open mind is certainly the first. And I think Tia talked about having a growth mindset, and that hand in hand goes together with having an open mind. Be a lifelong learner. You learn so much by working with other people. So some things that you can do if you are a student and you are wanting to be involved with people that are doing.
Bridget, I think you got muted.
I did. I am unmuted now. Can you hear me? Awesome. All right. So what I was saying is start with an open mind, be a lifelong learner. Different things that you can do if you are a student, but you want to align with other people that are working in the careers that you're interested in. Volunteer at conferences. There are conferences that happen, especially in our area. Well, of course, pre-COVID, of course. Conferences that happen that need volunteers. They need people to do some of the work and give out gift bags and things like that. That's still a way to learn, because if you're there where the speakers are and you're learning from them. Another thing that you can do if you're interested, you can read things that are free online, like the Scrum Guide, scrumguides.org. You can go to that website, you can read about Scrum. And the great thing about applying Scrum principles is that you can do that with anything. I do it at home with my children. You can apply Scrum principles to getting things done. You could be volunteering on a project or planning a vacation with your family, and you can apply Scrum principles. So that's taking something that you've learned and applying it to everyday things. And my goal here is to give you alternatives so that we don't have a mindset of, I can't, these things are not available to me. So I'm trying to create a space where you can still apply these principles and you can still bring something to the table, so that when that opportunity does arrive, you can talk through the principles. Because a great example, I do not have an IT background. I majored in English in college. I got my master's degree in technical communication, okay? I could not code my way out of a brown paper bag. But what I can do, I can facilitate, I can bring people together, I can get us aligned, and we can get the job done. So learning how to do those types of things, I think, are incredibly important. Theoretical knowledge is important. So learning the Scrum Guide, if you have the funds and are available to get, to gain some type of certification, like maybe a Scrum Master certification or product owner certification, I think you should certainly do that. So that's important. But what's also important is that empirical knowledge, that hands-on knowledge of applying what you've learned. That's almost just as important. So I think that the last things that I'll say is being able to understand and study empathy. If you have not heard of Brené Brown, many of you probably have, I would recommend listen to her podcast. She is big on empathy. Read her books, because even though she's not coming from an Agile perspective, she's coming from a world perspective. So understanding empathy, understanding emotional intelligence, because when you start working with teams that are applying Agile principles, one of the things that you will probably do more than anything is to facilitate and understand the psyche of the human mind and personalities and how people get along and how people do not get along. So in a very long-winded kind of answer, it is reading and applying what you've learned to your real life opportunities or in your work environment. And that will be my recommendation for those that are, pursuing an agile career.
If I can build on what Bridget said, a couple of things. One, when she was talking about the growth mindset, part of that is introspection, right? Thinking in terms of looking at yourself, what do you do well? And what are some opportunities that you have to improve? But I'm going to stress the positive psychology. So for those of you who want to know a little bit, we're talking about education here. So my background, my undergraduate degree is in political science. Working in finance, I felt like I needed to get an MBA. When I was working on my master's in finance, I took some Lean Six Sigma classes and got introduced to LSS. And that's really what drove me into Agile in the first place. But getting back to this, if you're looking for how can you build on your strengths, values in action, VIA is free. If you've not done it, go out and check it. Check out VIA. See what are strengths that you have. Bridget talked about being a lifelong learner. That's one of those things. Lots of people use RAT's strengths finders. There is a cost and expense to that. It's not very expensive. Definitely something to look at. Empathy and emotional intelligence. I mean, I'm working on my dissertation right now and it is with respect to empathy. A year ago, if people said, oh, people are going to care about empathy and what empathy is, I should say, a year ago, it was starting to come into the conversation. But 2 years ago, not at all. People were like, oh, empathy. Now it is truly something that folks are interested in. And I have lots of people that want to talk about what are you doing? Why are you doing that? So things that are not traditional, right? The English major, the poli-sci major, myself, right? They're not traditional, but there's skills. And I want folks to be thinking about what are your skills? What are your competencies? Think of the strengths you bring to the table. That's that introspection and how you grow and how you develop those. That's going to help you to be successful, but it's going to help all of us to be successful.
Wow, you've shared so much, Bridget and Tia. Thank you so much for bringing us this far. And I want to continue that kind of along those lines and ask if anybody else wants to share. How did you get started in your Agile career? You're on mute, Jackie.
Okay. So for me, actually, I got started not very exploratory. I was actually kicking and screaming about being involved in an Agile project. And so in 2005, 2008, I was working in the mobile industry and it was experiencing incredible change. And several mobile companies had to react very aggressively to set the stage for their teams to get the products out faster. So you're in this environment where you have to be extremely competitive. And we got a phone call one day. I was working as part of a software development team. And we got this phone call and they said, you're gonna be working in this common way of working. So it's not Scrum, it's not Kanban, but it was ideally an Agile way of learning because we were a small group of people trying to build a product and trying to make decisions, faster and build products. So it was uncomfortable, but after some time, there was the realization that we had increased collaboration and we were able to start being more transparent and break the barriers across teams. So that was my first, experience. And then I actually had the choice of either going to a traditional project management role or actually going in and being a Scrum Master. So my choice was, this thing that I was screaming and kicking about, it actually feels, relatively comfortable. I like it. So why don't I go a step ahead and be a Scrum Master where I'm still involved from a technical perspective in just seeing how the team is working, but it's more from, building the process. So that's how I got started. And, one of the things that, a few years later, I had the opportunity to work with Tia in her journey. So I'd like to welcome her to share a little bit about that as well.
Thanks, Jackie. And I have to thank Jackie, Sally, and Camille, because having that Lean Six Sigma background, if they hadn't said, oh, let's introduce you and let's talk about Agile, I really wouldn't be here to do that. It's really because of them that I can say that's how I got here. So when I think about lifting each other up and exposing each other, I mean, that's so important. You may not think somebody is interested in something, but provide the opportunity and then let that individual decide. I think that's also part of that introspection that we need to do and we need to think about. Because other people might see a strength or something in yourself that you didn't see either. And so we really, we've got to help each other. And unfortunately, I don't know that we're always thinking about other people or ourselves. And it's those connections and those relationships. If you think of the manifesto, right, it's people over process. If I was going to sum everything up in just a couple of words, I'd say people over process. And that's why we're here. This is about people. Lean in. You'll thrive and everybody else will.
And just to add to what Tia and Jackie have said, so it's interesting. For Jackie, it was kicking and screaming. For me, I voluntarily raised my hand and said, I want to try that. So what happened in my case, just a quick backstory, there was an opportunity to do a project, get it out fast, and they were looking for volunteers to do something different, not the traditional way how we do it. People are skeptical raising their hands because they're like, well, if we fail, we're going to be in trouble. Me being bold and saying, well, I'll try it. I raised my hand and was put into this small team. Then I didn't even know what Agile was, what it was called. I was just going along. And within that journey, I was learning as well for myself. So when we quickly went through the process, I learned it, I liked it, and I was like, oh, this is something I want to try. So initially, I started as a team member in the Agile roles. Then I moved into a Scrum Master. I did some of product ownership, and probably we'll touch on what those are later. And then now I'm in an Agile coach area. So saying that to say that, again, to what Sally alluded to earlier, raising your hand, being bold sometimes can get you in good places. And I'm thankful that I did that, again, with the support of my advisors to take that. And that's why I'm here today. So don't be afraid to raise your hand. It might be something or an area you're not comfortable with, but what you will find in even life or professional, in our professional areas, when you're uncomfortable about something, there's always something good that comes out of it, either something good or a lesson. So don't be afraid to raise your hand.
That's all really well said. I keep hearing the same theme over and over again, where whether you went kicking and screaming or whether you volunteered by putting your hand up, everybody just decided they're just willing to try it, right? So as Sally said earlier, fake it till you make it, or just test and learn, having the courage to just try something out. And so I see the theme across all of everybody on this panel has just decided, I think maybe what's the worst that can happen, right? I'm going to learn something and I'll decide if that's what I really want to be doing with my life. And as we're having this conversation, we're talking to about 100 people out there, and I don't know how many people will end up watching the recording, but I can see that the waiting room just keeps backing up. So I know we have a lot of interest in this. So there are clearly people interested in why Agile. Why? And so I'm going to ask you, why is now a good time to take action and become an Agilist?
So let me add to that, Rick. So just thinking about the situation we are in right now, the world, not even just in the USA, the world. We had a pandemic that hit us back in March, and things quickly shifted, and we had to adjust our lifestyles, adjust what we do. And really, that's the mindset, right? We had to quickly think, how do we survive in this new situation until we can get to the next level? So if you think of that, why now? Of course, there's digitization happening, there's technological things changing every day. And with that, there's a lot of opportunities coming up. Before the pandemic, of course, in some opportunities that we had, they had to be in a specific place. But now that a lot of companies are more open to being remote, that talent pool is opening. So if there's anyone out there, this is the time you want to try one of these agile roles, this is your time. People are also open to sharing and learning with you what they know. So you can build, that team that you want that can help you get to where you need to be. And try those positions now when we have that flexibility, right? And then with that, build where you want to go to next. So I think even though we are in the pandemic situation and everything else going on around us, there's a lot of opportunities that have come up and things we weren't able to do before we're able to do now. So seizing those opportunities when they're available, I would say, let's go for it.
And I'm also gonna add a few thoughts around that as well. Most processes take at least around 20 years to become mainstream. We are sort of approaching that. And what you'll see is when you look at all the, if you're looking to change a job, you see that Agile is no longer nice to have. A lot of the jobs have it as a requirement, yeah? So at least the knowledge. So, and not only is it just in software development, we are seeing applications in, in marketing, in business operations, in sales, and also just in managing the process as executives or middle managers. That is a sign that this is not just something that you can choose right now from a profession. It's mainstream already. So if you're not, if you don't have the experience, go try and read about it. There's lots of information, or take a class. I would definitely encourage you to do that.
Thank you. Those are, that's some really good advice. And I think I'm going to go back a little bit to what Joyce said a few minutes ago, and that was about what's happened over the past year, where we're all dealing with sudden change. And all of our businesses and all of our schools and all of our homes have had to deal with a complete upheaval. So I'm wondering, if there are things that you've been able to observe in either your business environment or your home environment or the schools that you interact with that an agile mindset would help resolve.
I'll start there, Rick. When I think about the business environment, right, the mindset is so critical because we started talking about people over process, and Agile aids in collaboration. And if we're thinking of the pandemic and go back to what Joyce says, right, the first thing we have to think about is how do we pull people together? Because physically, people that were used to being in the same location are now separated. We're on Zoom calls, whether you use Skype or Zoom or pick some sort of a service. It's now an everyday way of life. How can we improve collaboration? Well, Agile helps to improve collaboration. It helps to eliminate silos. That's one of our biggest challenges. I think if you think of businesses, most businesses have their own little silos in how they operate. And how can we break those down? What can we do? And Agile helps us with that because it does focus on the people. If we think about what's happening in the world, another big thing that happened last year, where all of the work around Black Lives Matter, and it continues on. We have to think about diversity and inclusion. It's not a question. It's a discussion, and we have to have that discussion. And we've got to continue to grow with that, whether it's in your personal life, whether it's in business. These are things that are out there that we've got to look at. Lots of businesses went under over the past year, unfortunately. And it's really a sad thing. So we're hearing more and more about time to market. How can you get your products out there sooner? What can you do? Agile can help with that as well. So there are things on the personal side that I think we've got to focus on. There are things in the business side that we have to focus on. And if we use that mindset and we think in terms of how can we do this in everything that we do, and I may be, you know, sounding like this preacher or agile evangelist, but I do think that that's part of it. I think we have to be in order to really be able to help each other.
Yeah, I think I want to add on to that. There are three mindsets or concepts or principles that I think can help, whether it is you're in your current business environment and how can the agile mindset help resolve, or even in your current home school environment. And those three mindsets or concepts are transparency, alignment, and visualizing your work. So in transparency, we shouldn't have hidden work. Like, we should be able to communicate open, honestly, have courageous conversations. And I know that's not always easy in a corporate work environment, but whether you are in a corporate environment or a nonprofit or in school, being transparent, if you're working on a project together, being transparent will help you tremendously. The next thing is alignment. If we're working together on any project, whether it's a personal project or something at school or something at work, we must be aligned. It is not going to serve you any purpose if Bridget is working on something totally different and unfocused than what Tia is working on. If we're not aligned and have that mutual goal to complete this project, whatever it may be, it's going to take us a very long time to get it done, or we may not get it done at all. And it's going to cause constant friction because we're always working on different things. So we need to be aligned. And then the last thing is visualizing your work. So have some type of board where you can visualize what we're working on in a project. And it doesn't, if you don't have access to agile tools like Jira or version 1, then create your own board. You can use Trello, you can use Asana. Trello is, for the most part, elements of it can be free if you want a digital board that you can share. Or if you're in your dorm room or you're working on a project at a nonprofit organization, create it. Now my wall is a little different because I have Carolina Panthers back here, but you can create your own Kanban board. You can have a to-do, in doing, and to-do, doing, and done. And you can apply that to your personal work, and you can apply that to what you're doing in your work environment or in school. So just remember those three: transparency, alignment, and visualizing your work. If you can just work on those three, that's a tremendous help. And people will begin to see you as that leader, that servant leader that's bringing people on the same page. And I think that that is a mindset that can help you resolve issues.
That's really, really well said. I love the combination of the mindset and the tools and techniques that you brought all together. I'm reminded of a boot camp I went to years ago with Lisa Adkins, Michael Spade, and Michael Hammond. And they talked about, you know, Agile and Scrum, and we talked about those things. But the main thing they really wanted to stress was, we can change the world if we all think this way, right? With the growth mindset and the agile mindset, if we all start thinking in those ways, the world will change. And it's not just about business. It's not just, certainly just not just about software development, as was alluded to earlier. So I appreciate both of your answers. I'm going to take us slightly in a different direction. We talked a little bit about the diversity gap earlier, and I want to return to, like, what can people like me do? What can the men do to empower, or at least create an environment where their female colleagues feel empowered? So I think earlier the idea of the imposter syndrome came up, and just simply getting a seat at the table is a very real thing. So I'm gonna, I just asked the question. Now I'm going to start to answer the question myself, because I've given this a lot of thought. It needs to be on my mind, and so it is. And I'm going to start to answer it, and I'm going to ask if anybody wants to jump in and add on to what I say while I mansplain this. I'm going to mansplain it to the men out there. So for the men out there, what we can be doing is taking a look around at the table that we're sitting at. We already have the seat at the table, but take a look around and see, are you surrounded by people who look just like you? Are you surrounded by people who think just like you? And where are the people who think differently and look different? Where are the people who are just coming from different backgrounds? So are you surrounded by technologists? Find people who aren't technologists because they're going to think differently. Are you surrounded by just a bunch of men? If the women are sitting at the outside of the room and all the men are sitting at the table, bring them forward. Make room for the women at the table. It's really simple. Our job isn't that hard. It goes beyond not being a misogynist. It goes toward taking direct action to invite the women to the table so that they can actually make you more powerful as a business, as an organization. Whatever you're trying to do, you will thrive because you've invited the women in. So that's my soapbox for right now. Anybody want to add to that?
I'll add to it. I love that soapbox. And I wanted to just, you know, a lot of times when we talk about allies, people can mean different things. To me, having an ally is about promoting equity and driving systemic improvements. So, you know, I think individually, like you were saying, Rick, men should share growth opportunities with women. Lift women up by advocating for them. A couple of things that I think about, like specific actions that can be taken. You know, when you are in a performance or a calibration session, you know, talk about the women, talk about their skills, you know, lift them up. And if there's an opportunity to recommend them for a stretch assignment, or even, hey, we're doing this new thing called Agile, let's bring other women in here, right? So taking the opportunity to do that is a very real thing. I think also, you know, if you get asked questions, direct those questions to the SME who knows how to answer those questions instead of answering for people. And that way you're showing your confidence in your colleagues or even those that work for you, right? So just directing questions that people might have. And then I think making sure that you are making recommendations with influencers within your organization. You know, make those recommendations, call out the women, and make sure that they're getting that seat at the table, right? And then I think lastly, I would just say that I think just listening to and acknowledging women's experience without trying to fix it, but then looking for and advocating for systemic change when you have the ability to do that, right? So you don't have to fix every little thing, but be aware, listen, and take that in. And the final thing I'll say is, women, we have to do this for each other too. This is not, we can't just wait for the men to advocate for us. We have to all do that for each other. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was excited about being part of this panel, because I feel like this is an awesome group of women coming from all kinds of different backgrounds, and we're here to help each other. We want to pass on our experience and knowledge that we have gained in working in Agile and just working experience overall to help everybody else. So now I'll get off my soapbox.
Well, I like your soapbox too, so thanks so much for that. Yeah, so we've definitely talked about all the different ways that you know, that Agile has helped us. I probably haven't talked about all of them, but we've talked about a multitude of ways that Agile has helped us. And I'm wondering, you know, we've been talking for about 50 minutes, using the word Agile a lot. But I really think we probably should go back and just, you know, define it a little bit. So what does it mean to be Agile in your profession?
So for me, who was dragged kicking and screaming, and finally coming to a point where I've lived the journey, I've matured, and looking back, I really think about it as humanizing the working environment. And now when you think about that, that's a difficult thing to do. But if you look at the core of it, it's really creating a positive working environment where individuals can thrive. And that's why part of being Agile is creating smaller teams where people can work together in longer periods of time, where they get comfortable giving feedback, building each other, and just exploring a little bit more. Now, when we get to all these terms, about, oh, we are doing retrospective, that's providing feedback. That's getting comfortable with talking with each other, And then the actions out of the retrospectives are actually to build the team. And it's the whole understanding is that you want to build the best product ever. And to build the best product ever, you have to have different skill sets. And then when it comes to even technology, if you think about pair programming, someone who's more of a senior developer is sharing the knowledge, sitting with a junior developer, one-on-one, providing that knowledge. Simple, These are things that if we don't get so rigid about, step by step, it's just being human, and really enjoying the work that you do and giving opportunity for people to actually be themselves and be happy and passionate about what they do. So that's really what it means for me to be Agile. Yes, I took the time to take the classes, but it really means like helping build the best teams ever and thereby building the best products ever.
So what Jackie said, when Jackie said, providing the opportunity to thrive, that's what really jumped out to me, because if I go back, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be at Fidelity if it wasn't for Sally. I wouldn't be a part of this panel if it wasn't for Jackie being my coach, and Camille being my coach, and recognizing that there was something there that needed to be promoted. So where do we do that? How do we help each other thrive? I think one of the ways we have to look at this is through psychological safety. And it is providing that opportunity and that safe space, because you've got to have that. And I think we've talked a lot about a bunch of other things, but we have to be able to share, and we have to be able to fail. And so for me, being Agile is that flexibility, but it's also the safety that it's okay if something goes wrong. I'm not gonna have some repercussion for it. We're gonna test, we're gonna learn, we're gonna try it out. And if it goes well, phenomenal, great, that's wonderful, all the better. But if it doesn't, did we learn something? Yes. Did it stop us from making a bigger mistake? Yes. And that's okay, and that's what we want. So let's fail fast, and let's have that safety to do that.
That's fantastic. Getting close to our Q&A section. Question again, to remind people, if you haven't already submitted a question through our chat, please do. I'm kind of keeping one eye on it, and we have a few things we'd like to talk about. And I just saw that my internet connection is unstable, so I hope you can still hear me. And now I'll throw another question back out there while we have everyone maybe adding to our chat, and we'll address those in a few minutes. So I'm just going to throw this one out and ask, who's inspired you through your career, or even personally, and why?
I'll take that one. On a personal level, my mother was, she's an Army veteran. So she was a single parent, and she's an Army veteran. And she instilled in us, my sister and myself, the discipline and the will to do whatever we put our mind to. She really taught us about defying the obstacles, pushing through. That was so very important, because she was in the military in the early 80s. She went in when I was in the second grade. So being an African-American woman in the Army, it wasn't unusual, but it was unusual at the same time. So we watched her move up the ranks, and I was an Army brat. We moved all over the place. And I think that definitely was inspirational to me. On a professional level, I have embraced a few authors. I read Lisa Atkins' Coaching Agile Teams. I think that if you are a follower of Mike Cohn, I think that provides a good foundational understanding of Agile. There's another book, and this is actually leaning into what Tia was talking about in terms of failing fast. I don't know if you can see my screen, but this book here by John Maxwell, Failing Forward. Yes. So we have to embrace failing. I mean, we learn in school that failing is not a good thing, but we learn from that. So I read this book and discussed it with a group of women similar to this panel, and I learned so much from that. So on a professional level and a personal level, that's what's inspired me.
And for Brit, just like with Bridget, my inspiration also professional has come from my family. I had a dad who and mom who worked in Europe a long time ago, 40, 50 years ago. And that kind of just enabled me to be have a very pioneering spirit. But I am the last born out of a family of 5, and they all have different, professions. One's in medicine, one's an actuary, one is a pharmacologist. So I think what has been really key in, my experience is being agile is just change, like different things, being exploratory, yeah. I think in terms of some of the inspiration that I've gotten along the way, I would definitely want to, talk about Camille. I have worked with Camille for, over 5 years. She's definitely an inspiration to me. And I love working with her in many ways because she's not only a great leader, she is definitely a very wonderful facilitator. So that's something that I've definitely loved enjoying and working with her on. I also see that Bob Gallen is on the forum today. I've had the opportunity to work directly with Bob, and he was a great mentor as well. So I definitely want to recognize, some of the local people in the RTP area. And I know I really love the family of Agile coaches. It's been great, and I think just having the understanding that women and diversity need to grow, and for a lot of the coaches really holding hands and trying to get this forward has been very encouraging to me and very exciting.
Thank you so much for that. And when you talked about all of these opportunities and all these people that you've interacted with and who inspires you, I'm actually looking off to the side here to the chat, and I see that Alex posted a list of books, and I'm looking at the names of the authors, of course. And I mentioned Lisa Atkins earlier. I got to go to her boot camp, and I went as a student once, and then I went as a volunteer to help with the facilitators get through the week of the boot camp, and I'm currently working with Diana Larson, so I have the pleasure of working with her on a liftoff that we're doing. She has a book called Liftoff, and we're at Fidelity looking, using some of her teachings there, and so I get to personally interact with her on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, and that's inspirational to me. So there's some really great people out there that it's easy to make connections with, right? It's a semi-small community, growing every day, but it's a semi-small community that you can reach out to, and you'll get opportunities, because the one thing about this community is we're all willing to share what we know and what we've learned, and you just have to ask. So what I've learned is when the opportunity presents itself, take it. Doesn't matter what it is, just jump in and take it, because you're going to learn something at the very least. And so that's my advice. But I'd like to know from each of you, what's the best advice you've received, and how did it change your life?
So I'll jump in then. So my advice would be take every opportunity you can to learn. Your education is not something that people can take away from you, right? They can take your house, they can take your car. There's lots of things that folks can take away, but they can't take your education. So take every opportunity you can to learn. I will take a quote from Aristotle and butcher it, I'm sure, but it's something to the effect of every day I learn, there's more I have to learn. And I think that's a good way to look at things. So that would be my advice.
And I'll jump in next. I'm going to say the same thing I said at the very beginning, which is say yes when opportunities come your way. And Rick, you just said this too, right? Like, don't second guess yourself, or second guess yourself, but do it quickly and then say yes to the opportunity. I think I mentioned the imposter syndrome, and I do encourage people to look for what are techniques to break through the imposter syndrome, because there's a whole wealth of knowledge and tips and things out on the internet. But I would just say, have that courage, say yes to the opportunities. I have done that. That's how I found myself in Agile. That's how I found myself at Fidelity. Like Tia said, that's how I found myself, doing lots of different things. And so I would say the best advice is just say yes and be willing to go with the flow.
I can add, the advice that I would give is definitely networking. I think I talked about that earlier. If you're outside of the Agile industry and you're trying to lean in or break into that, I would say join. There are so many Agile meetups. Just go to meetup.com and type in, you can join Agile meetups across the country and you begin networking. If you join Toastmasters if you can. Even if you are, you can join any type of organization that's meeting and volunteering where you can work with other people and learn what's happening in the industry. That in addition to what the other panelists have said, I believe that networking is also critical for success in this environment.
And just adding to that as well, with everything, know your what. There will be opportunities, there will be everything thrown at you, but you know what you can control. You know the confidence you have to do what you need to do. So go in there knowing your what, be confident, and hey, just do what you can to Sally's point. I keep going back to that, fake it till you make it, but remove that imposter syndrome, because until you try something, you never know. So know your what and go for it.
Two things for me. It's really along the lines of continuous learning. So be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And secondly, for those people who are just starting off or are just cowering or just like, I'm not too sure, I say have the courage to show up, be seen, okay? Because if you do not, have the courage, then you'll never know. So those are the two things that stand out to me. Thank you.
Thanks so much. This is, this whole thing has been inspirational to me, just hearing your stories and how this has benefited you, how Agile has benefited you. And I hope the people that are watching this have learned a lot, and I know they have some questions that they'd like to expand our thoughts to get us to give even more information. So I appreciate that everyone has contributed some more to our conversation, and we're going to see if we can answer some of these now. So I'll ask anybody who wants to jump in. Alex has compiled some questions for us, and I'm going to scroll through and see how well I can find them. And the first one I see is, how do we best explain Agile concepts to teams that do not live in an Agile space? I feel like a lot of our projects are run on Agile methodology, but the concepts aren't being spoken in layperson's terms, and it's causing a communication gap.
You can start with something called a team working agreement, where you bring the team together. Let's just have a working session and let's get on the same page. Remember what I said earlier about alignment? That goes right along with being aligned. So let's find the common terms so that we can speak and we all understand when we use this one term, we all know what that means. And that can be a part of your team working agreement. And that, is a meeting that could be, it could last long, but you can, just schedule an hour and bring your team together and figure out how can we get aligned with our taxonomy, with our terminology. So that's one thing that you could possibly do. And I'm sure there are other recommendations the panelists may have.
So yeah, thanks, Rick. So one thing I would say is a lot of folks on the call are probably familiar with daily stand-ups. So it doesn't have to be called a daily stand-up, but having those communication times where you talk with your team and you letting each other know what you're working on and you hear what other people are working on and you listen for where somebody got some impediment, right? What's the blocker, what's holding them back, and how can you help them and how can they help you? So it's not designed for this to be an update, but really working as a team, letting each other know. And that gets to Bridget's point on transparency. And you don't have to be a tech team to do this. We do this with HR teams all the time. There are lots and lots of folks that have stand-ups. And so that would be a very, very easy thing to do.
Great, thanks for that. All right, so let's jump to another one, and that is, let's see, when you're already mid-career, how can agility help you in growth? And it goes on, can you still be growing in your career and by adding agile principles? We want to get a resounding yes on that?
Yes, I can take that. Yes, you can definitely do that. So to earlier when we mentioned continuous learning, you never stop learning, right? So if there's something you want to do now and you want to take the opportunity to explore more on what it is, you can definitely do that. It doesn't matter if you're early in your career, near the end of your career. Agile, I know we're using the word agile.
Yeah, on mute, Joyce, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let me start over. I was saying that there's no, I don't think there's a timing to say that it's late in your career and you can't start anything. So when we mention continuous learning, I think it applies here as well. We never stop learning in our life, in our professional or even in our personal. So if there's something you see you want to do, always go for it. Don't hesitate and say, oh, maybe I'll do it next time. No, the time is now. There's never a next time. So go for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Joyce, when I think about that, I think about the shuhari, and thinking about teams. But even as an individual, you can apply shuhari because a first-time Scrum Master is gonna be able to look at the checklist and say, oh, did I do this? Did I book this today? And then the second stage is that they go, 2 years or 1 year later, they don't have to look at the checklist. They know how to set it up. And the year later, they're expanded their, working not just as a Scrum Master, but doing things within the organization in terms of change management. So it's really not really condensed to just, I would say the textbook concepts. Yeah, there's also soft skills, facilitation. All these things are only helping you to be a better agile leader, a better product owner, a better Scrum Master. It's it's something that you build on.
Great, thanks. All right, so moving on. Ooh, a question for me. How do we as women get more men to stop using the, in quotation marks, like me manner of dealing with others? What can we do to help others evolve to be open to opportunities for women? Well, I think one tool that might help people, one technique is, being able to give people feedback without, without being confrontational. So there's a technique from the Center for Creative Leadership called, it's shorthanded to SBI, it's Situation, Behavior, and Impact. And so if you can find that way of giving people feedback on the situation that you found yourself in with that other person, and the behavior that they exhibited that you found was not positive to your relationship, and the impact that it had on you. It takes the personal out of it, and it just puts the onus on the behavior and the impact. So it's just describing a situation in which you didn't feel like you were getting the most out of the relationship, the behavior that was exhibited that was bothering you, and the impact that that had on you. I think that would be useful for if everybody knew that technique, because it's not always easy, but that's a great place to start, I think, is when you see men dealing with you in a way that is not positive to your relationship, let them know what they've done so that they can change that behavior. Easier said than done, but there we go. All right. And if anybody wants to jump in while I search for the next question, feel free. A question for the panelists. What are specific things you have done in your career to break the stereotypes of women leaders in a corporate environment? One stereotype of women leaders is that women can be seen as, in quotation marks, witches, and dominating while dominating, while male peers who behave the same are seen as strong leaders and decisive. Another stereotype is that women can be seen by men as ramblers and naggers. Any thoughts on this? What have you done in your career to break those stereotypes?
I'll answer. I mean, I don't know that this is the right answer, but this is what I've done, which is I feel like a lot of the answers we're giving have to do with communication. And I think this one in particular has to do with networking and finding a sponsor or an advocate that has your back too, right? So I think it's growing relationships with the people that you are working with, getting to know them and letting them know you. And then, like I said, find that advocate or sponsor who can, when you're speaking up in meetings, will be standing beside you and doing those things that I was talking about earlier in terms of lifting you up and those kinds of things. But I think it makes it easier when you know you have a partner in situations. So I've often found myself as the only woman in a meeting, for example. And so I know that I have created relationships with individuals within those meetings that I can count on, so that when I do speak up, I'm not seen as the domineering, bossy person. I'm just seen as another person at the table because I've got my colleague there that says, I agree with that. And furthermore, blah, blah, blah. So I think to me, it's about communication and networking and building relationships with the people that you're working with so that you're not seen as the person coming across as domineering. You're seen as a person with a great idea.
One of the things that I saw come across was also asking about introverts. And it may surprise people to know I'm one of those introverts. But for those who know me, they would say, nope, they know that she is not. They know she's an introvert. So going into those meetings ahead of time where Sally says, she's got these relationships, but going in and saying, hey, I want to talk about X, or I plan to bring X up, and having someone who's there that can support you. It gets back to that psychological safety. So, when you're bringing these things up, that somebody there is going to support you. So I think we also have to think about who is maybe at the table, but whose voice isn't being heard, and reaching out. And so if there is somebody else in the room and they aren't necessarily that first person who's speaking out, draw them in. Jackie did it on our webinar earlier when she said, and Tia, because she wanted to make sure that I answered a specific question. So pull people in to that conversation. There's a lot of really good ways that we can help each other. And I think those are some of those things. So communication, as Sally said, is really critical.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on to what Tia said is, as a Scrum Master, as I started to learn the team members, I actually started to coach individually. So it's not only coaching, it's this, sometimes coaching as a team can be very uncomfortable here. And some people, especially introverts, they want to know ahead of time what's gonna happen so that they can react. So I would say, hey, you know what? I see that we are falling before stand up. Maybe I might reach out and text. I see, we are falling behind in this. I might ask you to speak to it and give your opinions. So it gives them time to kind of think about it and be able to, get their opinions in place. So those are some of the tactics I feel I've used.
And I think, Rick, the initial part of that question was, how do we break those stereotypes that women are again in quote switches? I think being self-aware of how we come out in different situations in meetings. As women, we normally want to help solve things, and we already think of ways of doing it. So when we are sharing that, we might come out as maybe too passionate. So just being self-aware of when we're in situations, how are we coming out, and recognizing that, I think, helps us bring others along and not come out as one thing versus the other. So just wanted to touch on that too.
And if I can add one thing to what Joyce said, Joyce is talking about the introspection, but also ask the people in the meeting, how were you perceived? Ask for feedback. If people see that you are open to receiving feedback, they are more likely to give you feedback. And that can help you to grow and improve.
Yeah, thanks for all of those. And one thing I would add is, for the men who are labeling women in that way, check yourself. Like, just take a look at what you might be thinking, and turn it around and think, if that was a man who behaved that way or said what that woman just said, would I think this same thing? Right. So we need to check ourselves in stereotyping. It's on us too. It's more on us than anybody else. All right, so moving on to another question. When I find myself the only woman at the table, or one of just a few, how can I influence diversity without having a direct say in hiring and recruiting?
So I would ask, I'm sorry, go ahead, Joyce.
No. So I know we talked about this earlier. That I know that situation happens a lot now, and we talked about bridging that diversity gap. So if you are at the table, being the voice for the women that are not there, and also bringing them to the table if you're able to. I know Sally had mentioned, if you're doing like in calibration, promoting other women, if you're in that situation, to say, hey, you're struggling with this idea. I know Bridget from this other area that can really help us get to a strategic planning for X. So if you're there and you know others, try and elevate them, even though you might not have that hiring authority or opportunity. Bring those voices in, be the voice as much as you can. And you'll see in some cases, it might take time to get there, but if they keep hearing you say something, a light bulb might go for somebody, and hopefully it might bridge the gap for you. So that's what I would say, try.
Joyce mentioned that we always want to help each other. And so I would say another way to do this is to reach out to help. Offer your services to participate in a panel interview, if there is one. If there isn't one, could they start one? Is there a desire? How can you help improve? Even maybe you're, like you said, I'm not involved in the direct hiring process was the question, but how could you become more involved? If you have a voice and you want to be heard, then what could you do to potentially change or improve what that hiring process looks like? We changed ours because we wanted to have those voices. So I'm sure that there are some things that you could do to help with that.
Yeah, and I was really thinking about, as a sponsor, EasyT Agile has the Stand Up initiative, and it really involves reaching out to people who might not even be in the profession there, just giving them the information, maybe having the ability to shadow you as you interact with, you actually work. So it's not, I think, there's definitely lots to be done within an organization. But I think even getting it to it earlier and exposing, college students, exposing people who, who might just want to know a little bit more is something that's extremely important as well.
That's great. I just got the 5-minute warning, so I appreciate that, keeping us on time. And to that end, to make sure that we stay on time, maybe I'll take one more question, then we'll finish out with a couple of poll questions. So I don't want to let this question go because I just saw it come across. Mostly male IT managers. So right up front, I had talked about the structures that we need to break down, but mostly male IT managers are driving our Agile planning and process. What are some ways to manage up within the Agile framework? Anybody want to jump on that?
Yes, I can add to that. So when managing up, I'm going to go back to what I said before: transparency, alignment, visualizing your work. So if there is a male manager and they're leading efforts and you don't see evidence of alignment or transparency, there's ways that you can ask the questions without sounding rude or not building good relationships. But I think that when you see Agile principles maybe not being followed, I'm not going to say not being followed, but let's say you see bad patterns that are not productive happening, I think that you can always bring an option to the table. So don't call something out, but then you don't bring a solution to the table. But I think that that is a way that you can sort of what they call herd the cats. So there are ways that you can do it. You just have to be able to identify it and then come up with an alternative solution. And also recognize that you may make a recommendation and it may not immediately be used, or they may gloss over it. You have to be able to have the courage to continue bringing these things to the table. So that's one thing that you could possibly do when you're managing up, because that helps us get to our ultimate goal. And that's all that when we're planning, when we're trying to achieve business objectives, we just want to figure out what is the shortest lead time to get to our goal. So if you can bring that type of recommendation to the table, I think that instantly gives you credibility, and I think more people will be listening to you when you are speaking and making recommendations.
John in the chat had mentioned psychological safety, and I think that's a critical part of this too. And I know that a number of folks have responded. One of the things that I use is quotes. This goes to leaders, it goes to anyone in the organization, but it's very hard to debate a quote. If you talk and you say, here are 2 things that you did that went really well, and here's an opportunity for improvement. Here's how you can raise the bar. Even with my managers, when you said X, here's how it made me feel. And that gets back to the SBI that Rick was talking about before. But it is providing that feedback, because sometimes it's unconscious and they may not even realize that they've done something. It's a behavior that has been ingrained. And so we're trying to help them to improve as well. And if you have that safety with your leader to be able to say, when you said X, this is how it made me feel. It's really something that folks need to hear. And it's not necessarily easy to do that. And I recognize that, but it does help.
Thanks so much. I'm going to just bring us home here because we're running out of time, and I don't want people to disappear before they've answered a couple of poll questions. We like to get feedback ourselves on how things went and whether this met your expectations. So I think, Maria, are you going to put the poll question up?
Trying to pull out the questions. Let me see here.
I got it.
Got it. All right. So a couple of questions for you just to wrap us up. We appreciate you responding to these. We want to thank everybody who joined us, the 100+ people who came to it or wanted to come to it and will probably watch our recording. Don't forget that this recording is going to be posted on EasyT Agile's website on the YouTube channel. And they have lots of other sessions coming up, so watch for those. Keep an eye on the website, get involved in the Stand Up Initiative. We want to hear from people about that. And lastly, I want to thank the panelists. This has been such a pleasure for me to be part of it. And I hope that everybody out there, and we're going to look at the poll now, did we achieve what you wanted to achieve? Looks like we did. Looks like we met some expectations, and that's always nice. So we'll take some of this feedback and apply it to something in the future. But thank you everyone, really, for being with me and letting me be a part of this.